You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast for Day 4, our wrap-up of Day 4 of the first test of the 2023 Ashes. It has been another stupendous day's cricket. There's been a test match for the ages. It doesn't matter what happens on Day 5. Our eyes have been richly rewarded with a cricketing feast. And it's going to set the series up so well, whichever way it breaks on Day 5. I'm Jack Hope, I'm joined by Max rowe-brown. Max, have you been enjoying the cricket?
Hello, I've been loving it. Yeah, it's made the 6-hour drive down from the Lake District back home enjoyable, not just bearable, enjoyable. Fantastic.
You were driving and watching the cricket at the same time?
I wasn't driving. No.
Okay.
I very luckily was being handily chauffeured by my fiance. So thanks to her for also allowing me just to sit there watching cricket and every now and then engaging in conversation.
We've got Dan, who's taking a little break out from his time with Kent to talk a little bit of England cricket with us. Dan, what a game this has been.
Yeah, it has been fantastic so far. I've watched bits on and off because obviously I have a lot of other work to do right now. Busy season in county cricket. We were on the road Friday night, Saturday night. Got back early hours Sunday. So, it's been tricky scheduling. But really enjoyable, and always helps to come back with from a road trip with 2 victories as well. So
yeah,
very pleasant with that. And what a great day in prospect we've got tomorrow.
As long as the weather doesn't ruin it. Max, before we get into things, Serious Cricket are our sponsor. You can get 10%. So that's you, Max, or you, Dan, or me, the royal you.
I'm not playing anymore.
You don't play anymore. Well, if you decide to dust off the spikes,
some I don't know, just something to put on the mantelpiece.
Yeah, you could.
Well,
ornamental cricket gear.
Yeah. Get a really nice, like a powerbow bat, £500, and put it on your mantelpiece. Or buy here, Dan. This is what you could do. You could buy 10 cricket bats, 10 of your favourite cricket bats, and then fashion them into a coffee table. Imagine that, Gray Nichols coffee table. And you could do it with the code 10%. With the code 10%, with the code TCP23 that would get you 10% off. Woodwork not included. But if you're at home, really this is directed at you. Get yourself in shape for the rest of the cricket season. We're about halfway through the year now. TCP23, 10% off at Serious Cricket. Max, do you want to talk us through some of the twists and turns of Day 4? England starting in the mid-20s, 2 wickets down after they had to bat in the dark for some reason. And what happened next?
I'll try. It's been more twists and turns than a twisty-turny thing, as the old saying goes. After Friday and England setting things up with some slightly left field decision making, today really was set to see what England would do. And England, North Macedonia kicks off in 25 minutes, so you can go over there and see how Trent Alexander-Arnold does in midfield again, if that's what's going to happen. No, the real sport has been the Ashes, and today, as you said, England were, trying to set a target for Australia. We were all wondering what that was going to be, 300 possibly, what they would look to post. But the first thing was to negotiate the start of the day. And Joe Root decided he was just going to ramp up the atmosphere, quite literally. First ball, and then just the next over, and then the ball after that. And he and Ollie Pope got things off to a flyer. And they settled the nerves. Before you know it, England were 80 ahead, still just the 2 wickets down. And it was looking really quite promising. But Australia, as they've done all through this game, held their nerve, came back into it. Nathan Lyon snagged Joe Root, pinned down Ben Stokes, managed to get both Johnny Bairstow and Harry Brook as well. Fell to Nathan Lyon. So it was Australia coming back into it, and Ollie Robinson then the man, after apparently being in the news for saying something to someone. I don't know. It's not the story. Just managed to eke out a bit more to not quite get the lovely symmetry that we wanted of the old Edgbaston chase, 282, 281 instead. and a tricky period for Australia at the end of the day, with the ball looking like it was turning, the ball looking like it was finally doing a bit. And then England decided they were going to give Australia a 50-run head start, because that was very kind of them, and that's the Bazball way, because it would be too easy to do it. Beat them soundly.
So you got to do.
We've got to revive Test cricket.
You have to do what the opposition least expects, and not trying to take a wicket was what Australia least expected England to do.
Yeah. So not long ago in the World Test Championship, I think everybody said, so David Warner really bad round the wicket, and Khawaja really bad over the wicket. So obviously just bowl round the wicket to Khawaja for the first hour. That makes perfect sense. It didn't really look like anything was gonna happen until 25 overs in, and Broad started doing some stuff, and Marnus Labuschagne and Stephen Smith both back in the hutch. 3 wickets down, another 174 runs to get, and it is all set up, as you said, Dan, for a very, very exciting looking day 5. I think we should probably make it known to any businesses out there on Tuesday rather, in England, that very little will be done.
Do you know, Max, that's an actual thing. There was a study recently about productivity during Ashes Test matches, and that there is evidence that people are less likely to turn up for work tomorrow. That might work from home, for example, and also less seems to happen on Ashes Test match days. The economy's got to take a hit, but that's all for a good cause. That's what you do for your team, isn't it? That's what you do for your team. Dan, I want to start at the beginning of the day with a question for you. I literally ball one. I mean, like they were talking on the radio about. I was doing that watching the TV, listening to the radio thing that sometimes you do, and they were on the radio. They were saying that might be the most talked about dot ball in the history of Test cricket. First ball of the day, England 26 for 2. Joe Root tries to scoop the world's best seam bowler. What did you make of that as a move to set the tone for the day?
Well, I think obviously it's a signal of intent, but I think what is on a bigger picture is the fact that he probably wouldn't have done that if he'd had not gone to the IPL and seen how other players are playing in the shorter formats and trying to evolve his game. And now there was a lot of criticism about him going to the IPL and then sitting on the bench for a while before playing towards the back end of the tournament. In the media, and I don't buy that criticism at all. I don't think that him playing against Division 2 opposition in county cricket is going to particularly benefit him ahead of this. And
hasn't worked for Steve Smith, has it?
And I just think that he's evolving his game, and I think that's so positive. And I've previously looked at Root as, from a T20 perspective at least, as someone who can't really hurt you. But if he keeps evolving like this, then he's changing. He's going to change that perception, and he's signalled that intent that he is doing so. And I think it's really positive that he's challenged himself in a different environment, an uncomfortable environment, and becoming potentially a better player for it.
Max, it was a bit sort of yin and yang early on. So Root did that. He scooped a couple over the head of the keeper. I think they put third man back, and he started to play the vintage Root steer to third and looked a little bit more composed. Pope was with him at the beginning, and then got the mother of all good Yorkers from Cummins. I mean, like, if in a normal Test match, we would, at the end of the day, this would be the main talking point. It was phenomenal.
And I didn't even mention it in the summary.
Yeah, it was a hooping in-swinger, like knocked Pope over, and the Pope sort of stumbles over, and it's one of those where you think, the batter must have got that wrong, and you see it, and you're just like, Pakistan
that was
fans.
Exactly my thought.
Yeah,
I was looking at it live, and I was thinking, like, maybe this is a sign of how you combat some of the intent that England are showing, because they're looking to be positive with every ball. They're not expecting the Yorker, maybe didn't quite pick it up in time. And then I saw it again. I was like, oh no, that just started like a yard outside of stump.
Yeah. He thought that was just going to be through to the keeper. That was the thing with that. And then Root, like, he fires back, and it looks like Root and Brook are going to put Australia under a lot of pressure. And then what you have to say about Australia through this whole Test match is that they've kind of been on the back foot, more or less, from bulldog. Zach Crawley hits it for 4. And from that point on, Australia just aren't favourites to win. They're constantly battling and fighting to get. I mean, I'm just going on the Betfair market, Dan. Like this is the best information that I have available. But what they have done,
better than WinViz.
well, let's say about WinViz. I think the better. WinViz was on one today with some of the predictions.
Talk to me about WinViz.
It's just. I mean, the problem with WinViz, as a little diversion, the best, if you want to know who's going to win a cricket match, the best predictor is going to be the Betfair market, because that's where you get the most amount of money changing hands, basically. And if that weren't the case, then there would be a massive open goal for people like us to just go on there and make bets that we knew were going to come through and clean up. Now, there are people out there who have an edge over the market, but not that many. You're probably looking at a few percentage points off. So when if you want to know who's going to win, that's the place to go. When WinViz is telling you a figure that's 20 or 25% different to what the market is saying, you know that WinViz has got a little bit of a problem. So, and there were quite a few occasions. Yeah, in what's been
underrating England in that situation.
Massively overrating.
Yeah,
massively overrating England.
Was it at lunch they had England like 55% winners or something?
I think they had them over 60% at some point in the afternoon. It was. I mean, unless they thought Moeen Ali had turned into Don Bradman, then there wasn't much of a reason to assume that. But Australia, they to go back through the day, they had their 35% equity in the match, a 35% chance of victory, and then England would eke it out and they'd be whittled down to 30, and then they'd take a wicket and it would go up to 40%, and then the same process would happen over and over and over again until they managed to get the breakthroughs. Max, the question is, or the thing I want you to comment on is how well Cummins and Nathan Lyon as well bowled for Australia to fight on for the Aussies and to really keep themselves in the game under quite a lot of pressure from the England batters.
They were absolutely brilliant, and what would impress me the most was just I think the composure that they had to continue doing what they were doing. There's a lot of talk about how do you combat Bazball, what are Australia going to do, and then we saw in the first day just like put a bunch of people out on the boundary to try and cut off the boundary scoring shots. But today it was more a case of just, I guess, sticking to your guns and thinking about it in terms of the way I see Bazball. It's sort of like you've got the base level of risk reward that you normally see in Test matches, and England are just pushing that up a bit because they think on the one hand it's going to get them a bit more out of their lineup in terms of batting, which looks like it's very much the case. But the other side is that it speeds the game up. But if you know as an opposition that that's what's going to happen, equally you could just try and basically it's really important to not get het up by England scoring too quickly, because you know that as much as the runs are going to come quicker, so are the wickets. So if you keep just make a few changes, obviously, like cut off some of the obvious scoring shots and that kind of thing, and maybe just try and play with that risk reward calculation that England are coming up with, you can hang in the game. And I think that's what Australia did, in particular Nathan Lyon. I thought the way he continued just basically ploughing on the same area of the pitch, even after Harry Brook and Joe Root were after in the first few overs, basically took him to the cleaners. He was gone for 20 off the first 3 overs he bowled, but he just kept going, and he knew that eventually if they cut off the easy scoring shot, one of them might do something stupid, and Joe Root ended up getting himself stumped. That gave him the chance to pin down Ben Stokes and put a bit of pressure back on England, and it worked from there. I mean, Johnny Bairstow's reverse sweep wasn't a particularly well played shot. I don't think there was necessarily anything wrong with playing the reverse sweep. That is a shot people play now. That's fine. It was just a bad one. But again, it was from that same line and that same approach. So just the conviction and the skill as well to maintain that, obviously, and not get thrown off was really impressive. And I thought Australia were fantastic.
I think there's another
until the end when they stopped trying to get people out.
That was weird.
They let James Adams score 12.
But I think there's another really interesting dynamic to this. And talking about Bazball, because Cummins and Lyon effectively stopped Bazball from being all singing, all dancing Bazball. Their 2 economy rates below 3.5. They really dried up the runs, and that was because of the quality of the bowling. And it also speaks to like how England are, somewhat adaptable. They don't just keep slogging if they're under pressure. What I think Cummins has done, I think Cummins has done two things well from a captaincy point of view, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, Dan. He knows that England are basically going to bat for 80 overs every time they bat. That's what England do. They're not interested in batting for longer than that, and they'll declare. They literally. They're so disinterested in doing it that they declare in the first innings when there's no logic behind that declaration. They're just, I don't know, entertainers or whatever. So Cummins, he has really upped the workload of him and Lyon, basically because he knows he doesn't need to go deep into his bowlers and he doesn't need to make sure he himself and Lyon are rested. They bowled 42 of the 66 overs. They really buried themselves. The other thing is the field placings. Now, I think a lot of people have read this as negative, but I think, again, there is value, I think, against England, the way they play, in just waiting for them to make a mistake, because they're trying to force the issues so often that if you are able to eliminate a boundary, and it happened to Brooke to some extent, there was one point where there was a long off and a wide long off in play. Because Brooke had gone over the top a couple of times, and he cut off the two scoring shots. And then where did Brooke get caught? He got caught trying to manufacture a shot through mid-wicket to a ball that probably wasn't there to hit, and is caught by Labuschagne. Am I right in saying that Cummins has got some things right here, Dan, or do you think there's more to this story?
Okay, so before the test started, before the series started, I posted on Twitter and suggested that I thought Australia were favourites, and I thought that they were, for the series I'm talking about, and would be better prepared, would prove to be better prepared than England are. And I still think that's the case, actually. I know, obviously, some people who are involved with the Australian management, and they're smart people who are going to be extremely thoroughly prepared. So it doesn't surprise me that they've kind of gone with a different approach to what a lot of people are expecting. I've just been binge watching Designated Survivor on Netflix, and one of President Kirkman's favourite phrases was when someone says, "Oh, that strategy would be unprecedented." He said, "Well, we live in unprecedented times," and I think that we can use that same comparison here to England and how Australia deal with them. England are playing an unprecedented brand of Test cricket, and Australia have got to try and do what they can to combat that. Now, could it be that actually all the field settings that they had on day one, where they were derided, was actually a really good idea, because they're just going to bore England out, basically, and know that England are only going to bat X amount of overs, 80 odd probably, as you say, and then they'll do something which is a bit unconventional, and that's happened. I think that also, when you look at this from like a longer term perspective in the series, I think England are missing a trick here. So let's look at this. Let's say you're going to score 400, and England want to try and do it in 80 overs, 5 and over, right? What happens if you score, say, just under 3 and over? That's 140 overs, right? You're putting 60 overs per innings more into the Australian bowlers' legs, and they are going to be knackered by the time it comes to match 4 and match 5, right? Instead of which, they're going to be fresh as a daisy, because Cummins and Nathan Lyon have bowled 42 overs between them in the second innings, and the rest of them have pretty much put their feet up for a lot of the Test match. So England are going to have continually fresh opposition rather than fatigued opposition. And I think that as it comes to sort of the 4th and the 5th Test, if Australia are still winning the series by then, I think we're going to see them kind of reap the benefit of that.
Rope-a-dope.
I think there's a lot of that, and a couple of other points I wanted to make. Big credit to Gary Lyon, as they call him, 8 wickets, but I think most impressively, 7 of them are against right-handers, and that's not often the case that you'd say that for an offie in Test cricket. And then also, I'm sorry, but I'm not a buyer. I'm still not a buyer of this, for want of a better phrase, Bazball. I'm not a massive buyer at all. I think that a lot has gone right for England in terms of the circumstances surrounding their matches since McCullum has taken over, and I still do think that there's a potential for it all to fall flat on its face. Now, I know players, some of them will say to me right now that they really enjoy playing under this current regime, and certainly from like a kind of a pressure perspective, you can definitely see that would be the case. They're not going to be put under a lot of pressure by the management or micromanaged or anything like that, which often you do get with other managements and captaincies. But I just think that England really, they're not tactically great, I don't think at all. I think that they're obviously running a lot of it on vibes, which is so weird because you've got a lot of people fairly high up in the ECB who are very anti-vibes, if that makes sense, in terms of a strategy. And looking at the first innings in particular, it's funny because I was watching the game with a few people before our Blast game, and I sort of said I wouldn't be surprised if they end up declaring here and trying to have a few overs at the Aussies, and they actually obviously did that. And I just think if you got Broad and Anderson batting, I understand it. That's very logical.
Yeah. But Joe Root on 118.
Yeah,
left a few out there.
Yeah, maybe left a few out there. Yeah, and I just thought to myself, well, do you know what? What would Australia done in that position? They would have pummeled them. They would have put their foot on the throat of the opposition and got 450 or even more.
I think flip side to that is that Australia are not going to be on 393 at the end of day one, and I think this is where Bazball tactically can work really well. I get this, but it does need to be said. I think that part of Bazball is about cricket's a conditions game, and part of Bazball is about exploiting the conditions when they're in your favour and scoring 400 runs really quickly. Now, the flip side of that is that you want to bowl when you think the conditions are in your favour. So maybe, and I think they were wrong to do this, and we talked about it after day one, maybe they thought the bowling conditions were going to be so good in the last 4 overs of the day that they couldn't pass up the opportunity. Anyway, we're going to have a break and then we're going to come back. We've got the late in the day action as Stuart Broad does good things. We've got the Bairstow question, and we've got what do England do with Moeen Ali still to come.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Cricket Podcast. A little reminder that you can find in the show notes a link to our Patreon, patreon.com/thecricketpod. That's an extra show a week and access to our Discord if that is what you're into and you want to support us, obviously. And you should like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on or watching us on. Tell a friend. Let's do some word of mouth pumping. Tweet us. Tweet about us.
For word of mouth.
Go to Reddit and tell Reddit about how good we are. And then they'll tell
your neighbours at the.
Then they'll tell you how bad we are. Yeah. Go to the test. Buy a T-shirt and get involved that way. Max, Stuart Broad. He is probably the hero from an England point of view. He might be man of the day overall. Australia, they get off to a really good start. Their opening partnership, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was over 50. It was higher than any of
61.
the England. It was higher than any of the England partnerships in their second innings, and it looked like. And it didn't look like Australia were heavy favourites when Robinson gets a breakthrough, and then it's over to Broad. What does he do, and how did it make you feel?
Stuart Broad did Stuart Broad things, and it made me feel brilliant. To answer it just matter of factly, but he finally got the ball to do something. It had been an inauspicious start with the ball, hadn't it? Jimmy very not happy, and bowled like he wasn't very happy. And Moeen clearly struggling, which we'll get to, and not a lot of action out of the pitch. So it looked troublesome for England, and that's on top of the slightly weird plans. They almost immediately, after not getting Khawaja out, went to the thing that got him out when he was on 140 in the first innings, which possibly wasn't advisable. But eventually Robinson found a bit of rhythm and got Warner to nick off. And as you say, Broad got the ball to talk. It was Labuschagne first with a nice setup, and then Steve Smith got him out. Well, almost got him out the ball before with a better ball that could have been LBW or caught behind if the gods of fate
had been
allowed,
caught or it had been LBW.
If one of the two things hadn't happened, basically, where either he hit it or it didn't hit the pad. But then the next ball was very much a similar vein, and Steve Smith fell, and England got very excited, overexcited, didn't they, Jack? You called it. They called it in the Discord.
I mean, like Scott Boland, was he finished the day on 13 or 14 runs? Yeah, like I think a good 8 of those runs are basically completely
because of England's stupid field positions.
Yeah, no, one flew through the
8
slips.
catches.
Yeah, but that's it. That's sort of England, and I think again, this is where I don't really have a problem with that. Like, I don't really have a problem with trying to get out a tail ender at the end of the day who's got no interest in scoring any runs.
Yeah, but I think that you can get him out normally without. You can maybe put an extra couple, 2 or 3.
Do you want to get him out or not, Max?
But don't.
Do you want to get him out or not? Like it's.
You could just do it with. You could just put an extra put an extra slip in and a short leg in. Don't also have the seaming off and then no one at fine leg for when if you're trying to bowl it at the pads and then because you know what can happen.
So this is what
we haven't got that many runs to play with. So I felt they maybe were a little.
I think it's worth a gamble because then Travis Head has to come out and bat, and then you might get Head, and then it's almost game, isn't it? Like it's.
I suppose there's a limited amount of damage. I mean, I think, and they won't go back to it in the morning.
We were talking sort of Bazball tactics kind of before the break, and I think this is one of the ones where they get it right a lot by trying to take wickets. I actually think, well, I don't think it is a fact that you actually have to take 20 wickets to win most Test matches, and a lot of recent England captains, probably you'd say maybe all the way back to Michael Vaughan, quite passive and sort of happy to let passages of play go by. 3 slips in a gully, and eventually Scott Boland will be out. But it's Stokes doesn't do that. I mean, like for whether that's vibes or because they are thinking about that slightly more deeply, I don't know. And I think that's kind of the duality of Bazball. Like you'll get completely rogue declarations that they'll later justify as kind of for entertainment purposes. And that might genuinely be true, by the way. That might be part of their decision-making prism, that they just want to do things that are entertaining. But from the perspective of like trying to win a cricket match, that didn't make any sense. But then they'll do things like consistently go down the pitch to Scott Boland and render him effectively useless as a frontline bowler for a whole Test match. When to date in his career, he averages 15 with the ball. Like it's
doesn't need more.
Yeah, well, that's it. But like, they played him in a completely unorthodox way, in a way that makes perfect sense for a line and length merchant who bowls 82 miles an hour. They treated him like he was bowling middle overs in an ODI, and it was he's got no response to that, and that's clever. But are they doing that because they've thought about it, or have they stumbled upon something that works really well? You never really know.
Schrodinger's Bazball.
Stumbling, and with this Boland stuff as well. I mean, like maybe they're just the lucky recipients of the final mean reversion that was inevitable, that he wasn't going to average 15 in his career. And I can't get my head around this. I'm still be honest with you. Like, I don't know if you, Jack. I know you play a bit of poker. I don't know if you do, Max. But this is like at the moment it kind of feels like England. They're like this massive fish on the poker table that's got won like 10 all-ins in a row, and you're desperate to try and pick up a good hand to stack him with a deep stack. But they keep on like
calling on the river every time.
Yeah, putting out one-outers on you when you're all in and stuff like that. It does kind of feel a bit like
I think there's a little bit of that, but then there are also things that other teams just haven't come up with a solution to. We're talking about things Cummins did, like using himself and Lyon a lot more, and effectively increasing the quality of the Australia attack by only using the best bowlers because he knows it's not going to go on for that long. That's something that we might see more teams do, and fielding positions. But there is 400 runs is 400 runs. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme if you're going to get them in a day or not. Like the other team are going to bat at 3.5 runs and over. They still have to bat for a shit ton of overs. They have to face 2 new balls to get ahead of you, and Australia
point
weren't
I'm
able to do that, even though you look at them and you say that Australia batting lineup is better than England's. Like, they weren't able to.
I think that the key point I'm trying to make is that we're looking at an outcome by saying that England scored 400 and therefore it's good is looking at an outcome based conclusion rather than a process based conclusion.
But I think the process works really, really well. Like it's consistently working really, really well. They're getting out.
There are days where it's going to go horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah,
what England have got is they've got a set of players, and like you say, like the normal way they play cricket. Here's a set of players. Here's the bell curve of likely probabilities, and here's the average. And we're like, right, look, we're going to move the average up a bit because we think this suits our players. And maybe other teams aren't going to be prepared for it, but we're also going to flatten the bell curve because it's going to come off one day and we're going to score 500 one day and beat Pakistan.
I don't think you flatten it as
also,
much as
we
you
are
think.
going to get skilled for 80 at some point.
There's a very
anyway.
low chance that anyone in this England management is aware of any kind of bell curve or what it might be.
Well, I think that's probably
right
true.
now.
Yeah. They probably think it's slack.
They might not phrase it like that, but I think in their head that might be kind of what they are trying to do.
So here's what I thought. I think that's what I thought when they started doing it. But now I'm not so sure that is the case.
Now you think it's just vibes?
I don't think it's vibes. I think some of the things they're doing, other teams haven't got an answer to. Like in Test match cricket, teams are picking attacks that have got Scott Boland's in, and Scott Boland is not the bowler that you want to be lining up against Joe Root when he's in ODI mood, or Bairstow when he's in ODI mood, because they don't do enough to put them off. And both of those, they'll bat a yard and a half out their crease. And this is what we saw of Root in the first innings versus the Ashes a year ago. He was a metre further down the wicket. It's completely changing what a line length is.
Some of this is also based on England putting out a complete road. But that's part of it.
It's
part of the tactic.
It is, but it's what I mean. If we were an Indian cricket podcast, we would say, well, why do England need to put out a fair wicket here? And I would say as well, the flatter the pitch, generally speaking, the more it benefits the best team, because they will have players and I think if Australia win, it will be because of Cummins and Lyon, the two best bowlers probably in the match. That'll be the reason they won, that they were able to stem the flow. Can we talk on the topic of bowling about Moeen Ali and his return to the team? Dan, finger injury aside, what have you made of Moeen? And to me, it strikes me that England have picked the right player because he's the only option. They've used him in the right way, and through a combination of Australia batting quite well and his finger injury, the wheels have come off slightly, and now they might have to look at making a change because of this injury. Is there someone they can go to, and were they right to go with Mo in the first place?
Okay, there's a lot of things, a lot of questions.
Yeah. That's a lot to unpack. Yeah.
Did you take notes?
Yeah.
Plenty to unpack. God, this is such a difficult question. Look, I have been on record so many times, particularly around the time that Dom Bess was playing for England, that I think that an off spinner is not the right selection for England, regardless of who it is. Unless you're, elite offie like a Nathan Lyon, for example, who's consistently going to average sub 30, or Ashwin, for example, as well, someone who's going to match up well even against right-handers as well as the preferred matchup against lefties. Then England don't need that, because they have a very serviceable off spinner already in their team called Joe Root. And so what they really needed, in my view, and I still stand by this, is that they need to pick someone who can turn the ball away from the right-hander. Now, you can get away with it a little bit against Australia because they do have a few lefties at the top, although how much the offie is going to bowl against Khawaja and Warner unless they get massively set is certainly up for debate. They do still have Carey and Head that they can bowl that too, though. I don't see the need for two off spinners in the same team. It perplexes me, and I think that this is, if you're looking at vibes or questionable thought processes, it is that international teams, I don't think they're any different here. They just look at it as a spinner, not a matchup spinner, if that makes sense. And so I would prefer to have Like you can't replace a left arm orthodox with an off spinner because they're completely different. So it's not, regardless of who it is, it's not like for like. So for me, I would look at a left arm orthodox or a leggy as a replacement. Look, who that is, I'm not entirely sure right now at this point in time. The other thing that is definitely worth discussing is the fact that, you know, Mo hasn't bowled more than 4 overs in a game for a long time. I think someone said it was almost 2 years, and on a road, asking someone to bowl a massive workload is
it's going to rub the skin off your finger, isn't it?
It's tough for any bowler, let alone someone who hasn't bowled a lot of overs consistently in a day for a long period of time. And that's not his fault. They chose him, and that's a selection decision. I just don't see the need for another off spinner in the team. Primarily, it would be my biggest problem. So I'm big on matchup spin, even in red ball cricket. It's not just a T20 thing. It is an all format thing. If you compare the numbers against left-handers and right-handers for finger spinners in Test cricket, you will see that it's as much of a thing in red ball cricket as it is in T20, if not more.
Max, I said we talk about Bairstow. Another half chance flew between him and Joe Root today. Are you dropping him for the next Test?
So it's tough because I think you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it on the pod, but you certainly mentioned it in the Discord when the first few chances went down the other day. You can, people, obviously the inevitable point comes up about, oh, well, folks takes those. But I also think average Johnny Bairstow takes those because they weren't particularly difficult chances. And I think them being missed comes down to Johnny Bairstow not having a particularly great day. My only concern, an argument I think you could make about whether the selection is the right thing, is whether he's ready to be actually keeping in a Test match. He did have a bit in the County Championship with Yorkshire, so he has had some time. But he looks stiff to me. He looks about as mobile as MS Dhoni behind the stumps, and that's not it's not very mobile. It's not what you want in an Ashes Test. It just looks like a bit of a struggle moving around, particularly down the leg side. And I think that is probably why he dropped the inside edge. I think maybe less so the ones off Mo. I think that was just hard hands, but it comes with confidence as well. So I think you could argue maybe putting him straight in was possibly an issue, and I think the one today is possibly more of one where you'd say Ben Foakes maybe takes that. Johnny Bairstow normally would at least move towards it rather than just watching it fly through. And he should have moved. Like it was halfway between him and Joe Root, and it was below knee height. So the wicketkeeper has to be going for that every day. He has to at least try. But again, maybe that's just a rustiness thing. So I'm not gonna, as much as I'd like to champion Ben Foakes and say he should be straight in the side, I'm not gonna jump to that conclusion straight away. I think it's maybe a bit of rustiness. Johnny Bairstow hopefully will get things back, and like that 70 in the first innings was a really important innings, and that's primarily what he's in the side for. But it's harder to take 20 wickets when you have to make 30 chances, which is obvious. It's still, as much as Bazball might change the way Test cricket's played, catches win matches, still as true as it ever was. But I will give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll give Johnny some sympathy, but obviously I'll be keeping a beady eye on it. And actually, I'm quite happy for Ben Foakes to stay in the Surrey side and score 100 in a successful chase of 501, if that's what it results in. We're not mentioning that, Dan.
No.
Right, here's we've got one question. we've got one question that I'm going to do from Twitter, but thanks to Regista and Ursine and Oddman and a handful of others, the same questions. I think we've covered most of them. Regista wants to know whether England would have done better if they had played conventional cricket rather than Bazball. Now we've got about 2 minutes here, so one word answer, yes or no, and you can have one sentence to back that up. If England played conventional cricket, would they be in a better position than they are now in this Test match, Max?
No. And I think that's mainly because of the time left in the game. We're going to get a result. If England played conventional cricket and scored 398, I think it's probably going to be a draw.
Dan?
Well, you asked me for one word, but Max has had a couple of sentences, so I'm going to take that liberty as well.
Well, that was one of your sentences. You just used one there. So
I'm going no, but it doesn't mean that it's right.
I'm going to go no, and I think the last 3 years showed how conventional cricket works for some of these England players.
It's unprecedented, and the precedent was bad.
I think there's some players in this 11 who are very good at exploiting conditions when they get the chance, and this tactic, this strategy, allows them the freedom to do that. That's what I would say. So what's going to happen tomorrow? Final thing. Dan, England, Australia, draw.
Well, it's not going to be a draw unless it rains, obviously. Forecast
There's a little bit of rain, yeah.
If you forecast in the morning, mixed in the afternoon, probably more likely to be dry than not. I think that a draw would be an absolute disaster for Test cricket, given how fantastic this is set up. I am going to go for an Australia victory and for 7-2 off suit to get its comeuppance.
Max, what are you saying?
I am going to plump for England based on the fact that I think they are marginally ahead because Labuschagne and Smith are out, and if the weather about in the morning might juice things up a little bit, and if England can get a fast start, then I think they've got a good shout. But I could also see a 2-wicket win that makes England's declaration look really foolish, which would be funny.
It would be funny.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of whataboutery about that declaration. I saw AB de Villiers tweeted that England would have got 50 more runs without that declaration. There's a new ball during 3 balls. It's entirely possible
we get none. You know.
So we'll see. I probably would rather be Australia. I think I would rather chase in this scenario, but I also wouldn't write off England. I think this is pretty much as close to a 50-50 as I think.
Could be I think Moeen Ali could be an issue or lack thereof.
I mean,
like he's struggling.
Genuinely, I think if Moeen Ali was going to be a big factor, then Joe Root can be a big factor. I agree with Dan on that. And I think using Scott Boland up the order as well. I hate Night Watchman. I think it means that they've got Alex Carey's now batting as a number 8 and Cummins is batting as a number 9, and I think that actually could be a problem for us. Anyway, we are going to wrap up now. We've done 42 minutes. That's 2 minutes longer than we expected. Thanks, Dan, for coming on the show. Good to have you along. Hopefully we'll have you a lot on again soon. Good to have you back, Max. And we should be back, I think, tomorrow to conclude the thriller. Goodbye, everyone.
It's done early enough.
Yeah. Bye.